Welcome, everyone. Joya Goodrum with the McMinnville Chamber. Today, we are going to hear about the proposed fire district that the city of McMinnville is pursuing. We have Councilor Adam Garvin, who is been a longtime councilor in the city, and also Todd Godfrey, who is the Professional Fire Department Union President. Did I get that right, Todd? Yes, very good. I'm going to turn it over to you. Adam, I know, has a presentation, some slides that he wants to share with us. So we're going to get started. We're going to hold questions till the end, post them in the chat. Thank you. And over to you, Adam and Todd.
Joya, can you hit the co-host button again real quick? All right, can everybody see that all right? And hear me okay?
Yes, it looks good.
Okay. So first, thank you for joining us on this Zoom, and thank you for the Chamber for hosting myself as Council President to present this to you, and Todd Godfrey, our Union President. We've both been involved with this for quite some time. We started this process over 4 years ago. When we initially started it, we invited everybody from around the county to come in and see if it was the right time and the right fit for them. We knew when we started that process that we were likely to end up with 1 to 2 entities, so 3 entities total besides including the city to create this new fire district. So after we went through that process, everybody bowed out for different reasons. Some wanted to guarantee staffed engines in their districts. Some wanted to guarantee local identity and representation on the board, and there's state laws that prevent us from doing elections by wards in a fire district scenario or any special district scenario. So after we were moving through that, we did a feasibility study because we wanted to ensure that whatever tax rate we came up with, that it was going to be sustainable and that it was going to move the service needle for our service gaps that we have, and wasn't just going to be status quo as far as you, the citizens and the business community, get for the money that you're paying. We also had a need for long-term sustainable funding. So currently the city of McMinnville has a variety of different services we offer. And so as you come in below budget during your fiscal year, anything that's left over from your budget is going to go back into the general fund and go through the budgeting process again. And so the fire department currently is competing with other city services like parks and library and aquatic center and police and wastewater and everything else that we do being a full service city. We knew we have substantial service gaps. We have about 600 move ups a year. We have delayed response times. We're not able to get what they call an effective firefighting force, so enough firefighters on scene to actually fight fire to the national standard in a respectable amount of time. Currently, we only meet that about 25% of the time. We have insufficient staff resources for emergency needs, which creates higher turnover due to burnout. Currently, our paramedics and firefighters run about 9,200 calls a year, and that's substantially more per FTE, so per full-time employee, than other departments or districts around. So you can you just have a higher burnout, you have a higher risk of injury and things of that nature, and Todd can speak to that a little bit later. We have response times delays, partially due to volunteerisms at an all-time low. So we'll continue with this new district if it passes in May to be a combination department. So you'll still have volunteers and paid staff, but the reality of volunteers is most commercial businesses that people are at work from their 9 to 5 don't allow a volunteer firefighter to leave during the day for if their pager goes off. Some employers here locally do allow volunteers to leave if it goes to a second or third alarm, like we saw with the creamery fire, or a bigger structure fire like that. But the delay you have in a volunteer response for that initial knockdown, which prevents property value loss, is significant, and this new fire district will address that. It allows us to have funding for large capital projects that aren't being competed with against other capital projects in the city budget, being a full service city. And then we've also most recently faced furloughs to help balance the budget, which also creates additional turnover from burnout. Wide district. So like I spoke to a little bit already, is it gives you one set of a single issue focused elected officials. So at the same time that this is on the ballot to form a new district with McMinnville Fire and McMinnville Rural Fire District, there will also be an election for 5 new board members. The top 5 vote getters of that people that enter that race would be the new fire board. The benefit of that is they have one focus, and that's to plan for the best service delivery of fire and EMS, and they have nothing else to plan for or have competing interests with of, police or parks, wastewater, anything of that nature. They'll have dedicated revenues, so they'll have their dedicated tax rate, which through our feasibility study was set out to be sustainable, so they don't have to come back for an operating levy in 3 to 5 years, which is why the tax rate is what it is for this new district. Allows budgeting flexibility because there's no competing interests in the budgeting process. They can budget and set aside money for fleet maintenance, fleet replacement plans, capital improvements, and things like that. Right now, we as a city for the last I would say the last 15 years, have struggled to just maintain our staffing levels and keep our apparatus moving. Todd will get into how old our fleet is here in a little bit, but when you look at the numbers, we're just basically treading water as a fire department right now. A big difference for an independent district is it gives you a substantially better opportunity for state and federal grants. Currently, if we were to go out for a grant, and we've ran into this in the last few years, you go out for a grant and they want to know all your reserves you have as a city, but they don't take into account why you have those reserves and what the legal stipulations are on how those reserves can be spent. So you put in for a fire grant because we have air packs that are outdated and they fail when our firefighters are trying to enter a building. We also have to put down that we have a substantial wastewater reserve fund, which we've always operated with as a city because we don't go out for capital bonds for expanding our wastewater system. We collect money off of our water and light bills, and then we basically pay as we go through our expansion. We haven't floated a bond for a wastewater expansion as long as I can remember. But the downside of that is it puts you in a less likely position to get a federal grant because the feds look at it as you have a savings account there, even though that's not for fire. It can't be used fire by Oregon statute and budgeting law. It has to be used for wastewater because that's what you, the citizens and the business community, are paying for on your water and light bill. There's no competition for capital projects. Like I said, this is a single focused body that is only about fire and EMS. And so you're not going to see competition for capital projects like a new pool or a community center or police station or anything else that a full service city might go out for from a capital project standpoint. And it just allows them to plan for the best service delivery. Is this common? So throughout the nation, consolidation and mergers have definitely picked up speed over the last 2 decades. in the state, you have Scappoose, St. Helens, Klamath City, Beaverton, Redmond, and then Newburgh just merged into Tualatin Valley a couple years ago, and that's probably the most common that people would resonate with. And then Ashland is currently in the same process that we are right now to move forward with the merger. Throughout the county, there's more independent fire boards and districts than there is city departments. The only city departments in the county is McMinnville, Dundee, and Lafayette. Dundee currently is looking at merging with Dundee Rural Fire District, just like McMinnville's doing. Dundee was at the table with us initially. When you create a fire district, you do need boundaries to touch. So the only way that Dundee could ever come into this fire district is if we had Carlton or Dayton, because that's who touches McMinnville and McMinnville Rural Fire District from boundaries. So you can't drive through a fire district to merge into another fire district. You have to have continuous borders to merge together. The other issue, if you have more than one or two entities trying to create a new fire district, is all those entities have to pass at the same time for that fire district to form. Where once this fire district's formed, you can have a few different entities wanting to annex in, and if that annexation fails for that one district, say Carlton, but Lafayette passes that they want to annex in, they would still be allowed to. So when you're forming a new district, it's better to have the least amount of people at the table as possible, because if one of them didn't pass, the whole district wouldn't be able to form. Todd will pick it up here. I'm going to mute my mic and he'll talk about what you're going to get and then also what you wouldn't get if it doesn't pass.
Gotta remember to hit that unmute button for me. Everyone hear me okay? So I haven't heard anybody say no. So what do we get for this? So currently we staff with a minimum of 11 people per day. 8 of those people are on ambulances the entire time. They'll swing over to the fire engine if we get a fire call, or they'll take their ambulance to the fire. But as we've seen several times, the ambulance gets there and we don't have a fire engine to follow up with them because they're on another call, or they're busy running around, or they're on the other end of town and they're clearing a call and they're trying to get to the creamery from Old Stone Village. So this would give us more dedicated fire staff. Those fire staff would be on fire engines, and it would actually reduce our response times by up to 90 seconds. We put in there both fire and EMS because the current plan as it's written would add roughly about 15 new staff over the course of the first 5 years. With those 15 staff, we would get more people on our first out engine, which currently only has 2. It's got an engineer and a captain on it, but no firefighters. And by our SOGs, we need to have firefighters in town. We can take those from the ambulance, but out of town, we have to take an ambulance out of service and grab those firefighters to go to any of our areas that are just outside of town there. So it would definitely greatly reduce our response times. And then the other part of some of those 15 people is that we would hopefully be able to have the staffing to actually staff a second fire engine. So like I said, the creamery fire and also the apartment complex fire that was just down the road 4 blocks from the fire station that our first out fire engine couldn't make it to. They were the second or third fire vehicle on scene. That was because they were up Willis Road helping with a medical call way out of town there. So staffing a second engine would greatly reduce our response times and get us on scene quite a bit quicker. The replacement of an aging fleet. Currently, we do not have any kind of vehicle replacement plan. We have some ideas, we have some thoughts, but the city, the way that it operates, actually all government agencies operate, is that if you don't spend your allotted budget for that year, it gets put back into the general fund and then reallocated the next year. So planning to replace a current cost of roughly about $700,000 for a fire engine is very difficult. It's just difficult to get $700,000 in 1 year. That's why we took out the loan for current first out fire engine and the ladder truck. And that was back in 2015 that we purchased both of those. By national standard, we should start contemplating replacing both of those and getting plans in place to replace both of those. The ladder truck can go up to about 20 years. Fire engines, especially the way that we use this first out engine, should be replaced every 10 years. And you can stretch that to about 15 with being able to cycle it out a little bit. Our current first out new engine has 78,000 miles on it. So it's getting up there for 8 years old. You go another couple of years and we're going to be definitely over that 100,000 mile mark. When you're talking a vehicle that carries 800 gallons of water at 8.5 pounds per gallon, and then running down the road and twists and turns and curbs and everything that we go off of, those things definitely start breaking down over time. So having a replacement fund, which is what this new district would allow us to do, can help us and help the new fire board plan to replace vehicles gradually over time versus having to ask the taxpayers for a bond or levy or something to replace vehicles that need to be replaced. To get to Andrew's question, since we're on the topic, those two vehicles, like I said, were 2015. Our next newest engine is a 1995. Excuse me, we have a 2000 that is an urban interface engine. So it's not, we don't use it in town. We use it for outside wildland fires. Our next in-town fire engine is a 1995, followed by a 1994. The 1994 is currently out of service. It's been out of service for almost a year now because it could not pass its pump test. And the cost to fix that and get that up to par where it needs to be just greatly runs the value of that vehicle at this point. So it is something that we're looking at trying to replace. We are putting in for grants for it. But like Councilor Garvin spoke to, grants are very difficult for us to get at this point. The national standard that Councilor Garvin spoke to as well, we fall into what are called NFPA standards, and that is 17 firefighters on scene of a structure fire in McMinnville. This is just a house fire in McMinnville in less than 6 minutes. Our current standard that we have adopted as a city has been less than 10 minutes, and we haven't been meeting that. Like Councilor Garvin spoke to, about 25% of the time we get that number of quote unquote effective firefighting force on scene. That's nobody's fault. For the longest time, we were able to rely on volunteers to get there quickly and help us get on scene quicker. But we've had such a decrease in volunteer numbers for all the reasons that Councilor Garvin's already spoken to, that it's just made things very difficult for us. The increased fire and life safety, I'm sure most of you have met our Deputy Fire Marshal, Steve Candela, and probably not a lot of you have met our new Fire Marshal, Ty Darby, that we just hired about a month ago now. But this would allot a second Deputy Fire Marshal. They don't just come around and do the inspections on buildings and different new construction, old construction, remodel stuff. They also do our investigations on fires. So after every fire, they're called out to, not every fire, but most every fire, especially the major ones, they're called out to sift through everything and try and figure out how it started and do all that. So getting some relief there is definitely needed at this point. It would also allow us to start construction on 2 substations that are going to be strategically placed across the city. We do have a heat map of where a lot of our calls are, and we do have a feasibility study that has shown that our current fire station location isn't adequate for what we're trying to do. Is it out of the picture? Is it something that we need to get rid of this current station? No, it definitely doesn't need to go away at this point. It's got a great training facility, a big, large meeting room for us to use and continue to use for the foreseeable future. But getting vehicles stretched out from the downtown core to be able to respond to the core or to the outlying areas, still in the city area, but in the outlying further growth area that we're doing, is definitely going to help us reduce our response times. And then if you're looking at the rural area, the McMinnville rural area, and kind of trying to balance, whether this is cost effective for you or not, there is a real possibility of reducing your homeowner's insurance pretty significantly if you're living within 5 miles of that new staffed substation. Staff being the key word. I live within 5 miles of a substation for Sheridan Fire, and that's not helping me, but getting it staffed is definitely going to help that homeowner's insurance. So I do believe that that's something that you can call if you live in that area. Call and say they're looking at doing a fire station in this area that would be staffed. What would that do to my insurance rates? And they should be able to give you some sort of an estimate on that. Get the next slide there. So what happens if it doesn't? You know, the easy answer would be that, you know, your taxes don't go up and nothing really changes. But as we've seen, especially over the last few years, our call volume has jumped up quite a bit. Between last year and this year, it's gone up about 300 calls. We foresee that going up at least that for every year from here on out. So although we wouldn't create a new fire district and your tax rates would remain the same, we would see a decrease in service levels. We would have a delayed response time, and it would be just more and more difficult for us to be able to respond to the calls. I'm sure that you guys have all read and seen that, because we put it out there several times, but we asked for more than 600 move-ups in the last each of the last couple of years. Those are ambulances from 12th Valley, Sheridan, Grand Ronde, and those are definitely killing our response times in the city. So what is a move up? A move up is McMinnville has nothing left to give to our residents. There's no ambulances, there's no fire engines, there's nothing that can come and help you when you need that. Now we do try and get clear, and we do call in the volunteers. Hopefully they can show up and get some, you know, first response going on. But when we're having to rely on those outside agencies more than twice a day, or roughly twice a day, then it's really making our service to the community more and more difficult. We have already had, like the city's spoken to several times, we've deferred maintenance on our own building, as well as, you know, the city has deferred maintenance on other buildings around the area. To put it in perspective, about 6 years ago, we had a seismic study done on our fire station, which told us that that fire station will fall down if we do have an earthquake. The cost to retrofit that to be able to survive an earthquake was about $4.5 million at the time, which obviously everything's gone up since then. And then the cost to actually just take it down brick by brick, seismically upgrade it and put it back was about $5.5 million. The grant at that time that we were looking at doing was about $2.5 million. So the city would have had to come up with between $2 and $3 million, depending on which route they went with. It wasn't something that we had the money for, and it's again a deferred maintenance that we've moved on and on. So being able to get caught up on our deferred maintenance, build new stations. Joy, I see your question there, and I'll get to that in just a sec. But be able to build new stations strategically around, and then increase our staffing is going to help us with our response times. The proposed areas for new substations would be in the southeast corner, roughly around the airport area there, somewhere in that area that they're looking at doing all sorts of new building and everything out there. And then also in the northwest corner where all the new construction's going. There hasn't been any, you know, steadfast properties that we've said this is where it's going to be, but those are the areas that we have identified that stations need to be built. Next slide, please. You want to speak to this one, Adam?
Yeah, so one of the questions is, you know, why the constraint, and, you know, what has this been done through mismanagement of money, or you know, why are we here? And so to give a little historical perspective on some tax things, and not here to advocate if they were good or bad. I'm just kind of laying it out there on why we're here with our budget constraints. So in 1990, Measure 5 passed, which limits the millage rate to $10 per thousand. And then in 96, Bill Sizemore got Measure 47 pushed through, which rolled back your assessed property tax values by 10%, and then limited their tax growth to 3% a year. And then Measure 50 a year later, which passed pretty easily, gave everybody a permanent fixed tax rate. For the city of McMinnville, that's $5.02. And for McMinnville Rural Fire Protection District, that's a little over 97 cents. And so what that means is when you build a property, or, you know, your house is built or your commercial building's built, and you get that assessed tax rate, unless you make a major remodel or you tear that down and rebuild that, your property tax value is only going to go up at 3% a year. And so that's how our city budget has grown over the years, is that 3% a year for property tax growth. As well as when new building comes online, you have increased that tax base as well. But you look at our cost of doing business. Just last year, the CPI was 7.1%. There's been many years between now and 1996 when CPI was well over 3%. So that's one of the ways we got to where we're at budget wise. Now we're going to get into who's going to make up the district and what they currently pay and what it's going to cost if you're a city resident or you're a McMinnville rural resident. So currently the city of McMinnville Fire Department is McMinnville city limits proper, roughly 10.5 square miles, currently funded fire service $1.50 out of that permanent 502 tax rate. The McMinnville Rural Fire Protection District is roughly 84.5 square miles, which is that red border you see on that map, excluding the city limit property, would make up the current McMinnville Rural Fire Protection District. Their current tax rate that those citizens see in the rural area on their Yamhill County tax bill is 97 cents. The reality, though, is that they're currently contracted with the city fire department at $1.23 per thousand. And the reason why they're only seeing 97 cents on their tax bill is a number of years ago, the McMinnville Rural Fire Protection District went out for a levy. They have some savings account built up on that, as well as the development you see out in the rural areas. So they've increased some of their tax base over the years. So they have a savings account saved up. And so they're unsustainably paying $1.23 for fire service via contract with the city, and they're only billing their constituents 97 cents currently. So regardless if this passes or not, the rural fire board is going to have to either or look at merging with somebody else and increasing their citizens' tax rates in the very near future. To the substation discussion, they have about $700,000 left in their savings account, and that is earmarked for rural taxpayer, current rural taxpayer most likely will not be located within city limits proper. That's not a set in stone rule, but those substations have to be of direct benefit to the rural residents if this new fire district board is going to utilize any of that $700,000 to fund those. Other things that you could use that savings account for is if you wanted a urban interface engine or new water tender or something of that nature that would have direct benefit to the rural residents. But the new McMinnville Fire District, which is the merger of the city department and district, would be everything you see there bordered out in red. Everybody in that 95 square miles would be paying $2 per thousand. The reason we have $2 per thousand and not $1.50 or $1.72 or $1.80 is when we went through that feasibility study, $1.80 would have got us about 5 years of runway. It would have got us substation design. It would have got us 9 FTEs total instead of 15 FTEs for apparatus, plus another about 3 FTEs for admin, like this $2 is doing, because currently the city takes care of HR and legal and finance and things like that. And this new fire district will either have to contract for that or they need to bring down those FTEs. So the service level increase just wasn't there at the $1.80 versus $2. In addition, you'd have to go out for a levy at around the 5-year mark. And so when we went through a scientific polling about a year ago, we propose both those questions to proportionately to the city resident voter and the rural voter, and overwhelmingly they favored the $2 per thousand from the sustainability aspect and the additional service level versus $1.80, and so that's why we pushed the $2 rate forward. For perspective, your closest large fire district is Tualatin Valley. They're at $2.08 or $2.05 per thousand, and then they also almost always have an operating levy on the table as well at about another 30 cents. So, you know, your neighbors up in Newburgh are paying well over the $2 per thousand rate. Proposed costs. So as I spoke to, currently the rural resident on their tax bill sees that they pay 97 cents per thousand for fire service. This new rate will bump that up to $2 per thousand. Using Newburgh as another example, their rural residents were paying around 45 cents per thousand when they merged into Tualatin Valley and went to that $2.08 rate. It isn't a small amount, but again, this is off tax assessed value and not off real market value. For the city voter, if this passes in May, the current $1.50 per thousand that we levy as a city, we've elected to freeze that. So your July 1 tax rate increase for this coming fiscal year 23-24, you would see a 50% increase on a $300,000 tax assessed value. That's about,
real quick,
yeah.
a 50-cent increase, not a 50%.
50 cent, yeah, sorry.
That's right.
50-cent increase. So on a $300,000 house of tax assessed value, which is actually more than the average house in McMinnville. The average house in McMinnville is about $267,000 of tax assessed value. You're looking at about $150 a year, a little over $10 a month, to get all this increased service level. So what are we going to do with that remaining $1.50 from a city perspective? If we walk away from that 502 and don't just suspend it, aka freeze it, because of Measure 5, Measure 47, and Measure 50, we could never bring that taxing authority back online if we just walked away from it. That's not in the best interest of the city or the citizens long term when you're looking out 5, 10, 20 years from now. So what we as a council and the budget committee decided, because the budget committee does set the tax rate that is levied every year, the council just ratifies it through our budget process, is that we're going to freeze it for fiscal year 23-24, and we're going to further engage citizens on how and what we're going to phase that back in for in the coming years. And the reason we reached that decision is we went out for polling the end of December, beginning of January, and there was overwhelming support to freeze it for the first year. And then there was support to phase it back in over the next 3 years after that, which would have been about 50 cents a year. So you would have seen a 50% increase over a 4-year period. But the thing that actually pulled better than the 3-year phase in after the 1-year freeze was that citizens really wanted more engagement and discussion on how and why that's going to come back online. And so we as a budget committee and city council heard that and want to work with the citizens. You know, the first step will be getting some third-party facilitated focus groups and not just relying on scientific polling or a public survey. You know, those are additional tools that we can use, but the first step is to really get those focus groups. So you can have focus groups, typically it's 8 to 15 people, facilitated by a third party to understand their wants, needs, and desires. There is no counselors in that in that discussion. There's no city staff in that discussion. It's really a open dialogue from that focus group. And you could form focus groups around a variety of different needs or issues. That could be fixed income seniors, could be the business community, could be the Latino community, really whatever that third-party consultant really wants to bring to the table for focus groups. And if there's a strong presence of concerned citizens that represent a focus group, that's who we want to engage with. We want to hear why and how you guys want that brought back online. And we're cognizant of that hitting your pocketbook. Above anything else is transparency and accountability. So going to these focus groups and then going to scientific polling from that, and having this year-long dialogue is going to give us the data we need to be accountable. And having this discussion is all about transparency. So when you go back to one of those initial slides where we talked about other districts, a lot of districts don't really talk about retaining tax authority until they're well into the service level impact messaging, ramping up to the campaign, and then they hope it gets glossed over. I saw that happen when Tualatin Valley merged in with Newburgh, and that wasn't something that set well with me as a citizen, even though I wasn't in that district. And so as we move forward through this last 4+ years of fire districting effort, it's been my goal and my point to make sure that we lead the discussion with this $1.50, and there's nothing hiding behind any closed doors, and everybody's engaged in the process of what it's going to cost and what they get in return for it. Now we'll open up for questions. I'll pop into the chat, see what else is in there. And then I also have a slide that has some additional contact information. The QR code will take you to our messaging site, safermcminnville.com. The McMinnville.org.gov consolidation is some baseline info about the consolidation. iHeartMac.org is our new community engagement platform software. Again, trying to be more transparent as a public entity and get that information out there. You are required to create a login and sign up for that. It is 100% free, and it just allows you to engage and message and get information directly from the city and not from a third-party source. My council contact information is their email and phone, and then our social media pages for the campaign effort is at a Safer McMinnville on Instagram and Facebook.
Thank you, both Todd and Adam, for your presentation. I saw there was one question, well, a comment more about the median price. And Todd, your comment was real market value or assessed tax value, because when we're talking about this tax, this assessment, it will be on the assessed tax value of your home, which is often very different than the real market value. Is that correct?
Correct, Joya. So to your point, Dave, the median sale price is around $500,000.
So that's the real market value, not the assessed value, is what I'm looking at online.
Yeah, and
Okay.
this tax rate is the $2 per thousand is going to be off the assessed value. So
Okay, thank you. That clears it up.
Another business owner and chamber member, I don't want to mention his name, reached out to me last week and wanted to know what it would cost him directly. His real market value on his house was $485,000 on Zillow, and his tax assessed value was about $240,000. It was $238 and some change. So at $240,000 of tax assessed value, it was going to cost him $120 a year, $10 a month if he voted yes and this fire district passed. Your tax assessed value is really derived off of when your home was built. So if you have a home that was built more recently, your tax assessed value is going to be closer to your real market value. But if you're living in a home that was built in 05 or 07 or 1970 or basically anywhere, before we saw this price boom here locally in the last couple years, your tax assessed value is going to be substantially lower than your real market value.
Adam, did you see that next question about rolling back the taxing authority and the process to increase it as needed in the future?
So I guess would be clarification from Matt on that so if we're freezing it like we are right now, the taxing authority is set by the budget committee and the city council. And so that is set annually through our budget process. If we were to forego retaining that taxing authority and just giving it back to the state, we could never get that 502 back. You can pause it indefinitely, but if you give it away, you can never get it back.
So I think the other thing to add to that, Matt, that Adam talked about a little earlier was that the city's plan is to engage the community. I believe July of this year, right, Adam? To have plenty of opportunities for input from the community on when or if or how this next year, we know that it's going to be frozen this year, but the following year, if they bring any of it back, how they bring it back, where it goes, they want the input of the community for all of that. There was some talk, I don't know if Adam, you can speak to it, about using a professional service for that. So it's not like, slanted one way or the other from the city at all. I don't know if that's gotten any further, but the plan is to, and what was relayed from the last city council meeting was that they want to engage the community in that. They don't want to just decide on their own that they want to do X, Y, and Z. They want input as much as possible before they decide to bring any of that money back.
Yeah, so the third party facilitator for those focus groups would be that first step. And then out of those focus groups would drive the next step. Eventually you would get down to some additional scientific polling that would come out of the data from those focus groups. You'd go out for that. And potentially somewhere in there, you might have a public survey as well. The issue with a public survey versus scientific polling is those results can be slanted, given by who has access or who knows about that survey and getting it out there in that nature, where a scientific survey is, they make sure they're polling people across the political spectrum, across the age demographic, across the race demographic, as well as polling people that voted in 4 of the last 4 elections, 1 of the last 4 elections, 2 of the last 4 elections, and things of that nature. So it really gives you a more accurate and equitable data than just putting a survey link on a website and letting somebody respond to it once a day and make sure that their voice is the loudest.
Thank you, Adam. I had a question. Do you know when there will be those conversations coming? Will they start next year?
This calendar year, but as government entities, we operate on the fiscal year calendar. So for us, the new year is July 1. So that's when that conversation really starts, because we're it's premature to have those conversations right now as we're trying to get something passed. It just convolutes the message. Our message is really about service level and letting you know that it is frozen. And between May and July 1 is when we're in the heart of adopting a budget and finalizing things and moving forward with that. So, when we actually have room to breathe is about July 1, and that's when we're going to roll out that engagement.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Adam. Sorry, we had another question.
Yeah, to MEDP's question, will improved response times have an impact on home insurance rates? So the home insurance rates, or your ISO rating, is derived off of your staffed substation radius. And so if you're within 5 miles of a staff station, you do see a decrease in your insurance rates.
Let me jump on that a little bit, Adam, too. So in the city, we are in the ISO world, we're a 3 in the city. because most everything in the city is within that 5 mile of the downtown station. The rural area is an 8A, I believe, or 8B. And so they would definitely easily see an improvement with a staff station that's within 5 miles of their area. In McMinnville, they go off a lot of different things. The water supply that you have, which obviously ours in McMinnville is amazing. And then number of firefighters, how quickly they can get there, number of apparatus, how quickly they can get there. All of that kind of plays into it. Going from a 3 to a 2 is difficult. I believe like Tualatin Valley is running at a 2. They might be at a 1 in some areas, but it would take improved response times to get to that. I don't know what the exact criteria is for that in the city area, but it is doable. I just don't know if this plan has enough to reduce it that much. It might require more people, more apparatus to even do that. That isn't necessarily our initial goal. Our initial goal is to fix a lot of the issues that we currently have with our fire department. Having been here for 14 years and been a resident of Yamhill County for 41 years, I've seen all these issues. My father was a firefighter, and he explained a lot of these issues that were going on back, for a long, long time. But getting our issues fixed with vehicles, people, stations, getting up to par is kind of the initial response for this, and then from there we can definitely try and focus on whatever it takes from that point forward to reducing insurance rates. Andrew, to answer your second question, let me go back to your first question that was earlier. That part of it that I didn't touch was the drill tower training facility. That facility is in wastewater's, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but like 100-year plan of expansion that they have out in that area. So that building and that whole area is basically part of an expansion plan for the wastewater. When or if or how that ever happens, we don't know, but that piece of property won't be going to the fire district. That will stay with wastewater as part of their plan. But it's not something that we have to really worry about in the immediate future. They just did an expansion, and I don't believe they're foreseeing one in the near future, unless Adam knows something I don't know about that. We would be on a lease with that, so we would have access to it. Nothing would really change with it. We would have, I think, the normal government lease of $1 per year to continue to use it as we can. But in the long-term foreseeable, in the 10, 15, 20 years, looking at replacing that is probably something that needs to happen. I can't give you a timeline on when that would happen. And then as far as problems getting this passed with the increased tax and water and light rates, Adam, you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, I'll finish up on the drill tower a little bit. So the drill tower in this new district formation is officially written into the formation as a 99-year lease at $1 a year. The building and the property of Station 1, which is that original station we have in downtown McMinnville between Adams and Baker on 2nd, that was built in 1986. That whole thing goes to the new district, as well as does loan balances and PERS responsibility and volunteer pension program. So everything basically goes to this new district outside of the drill tower, because like Todd spoke to, that's in our wastewater master plan as additional expansion, but it is on a 99-year lease at $1 a year. Whether that new district board decides to maintain that lease for that amount of time, that'll be discussed among elected officials way after I think everybody on this Zoom call is done being around. So not something I can really speak to on what's going to happen to that between now and 99 years from now. As far as substation placement, that also the exact property is going to be up to that new 5-member elected board. Applications currently are open for that, as they are for school board seats and anything in the May election. They open February 4th and they close March 16th. And you could pull that application from the county clerk's office there on Evans and 4th. As for your question, Andrew, around the city service fee, that appears on the water and light bills at $13 for single family dwellings, $9.75 for multi-tenant, and $1.30 for people on subsidies or things of that nature. Yeah, I think you'd be tone deaf if you thought that that wouldn't have an effect on the ability of this fire district passing. But that's really going to come down to, do the citizens value their likely $10 to $11 increase a month in property tax bill for this new fire district in year one? Is that going to outweigh, what they don't get if they don't pass that? Their ambulance might be coming from Grand Ron when their loved one's in cardiac arrest, or their fire apparatus might be coming from Rex Hill when their house is on fire. That's up to the citizens to decide, and it's up to us as, in my opinion, the business community, city leaders, local firefighters, to get out and really communicate that message of, this is your service level increase, that you go from 25% effective firefighting force to up to 80% effective firefighting force on scene by that standard. And we're not going to need 600 move ups a year for this amount of dollars. And that's, to me, really what the question is in front of us and in front of the voters come May.
Adam, Joya here. I have a question. So if there's a fire in, say, the forest somewhere, that is not this district, right? Or maybe Todd, you can answer this. What would happen if there's a fire, I don't know, in the woods in someone's backyard?
So
Respond.
kind of some vague terms there. If it's in somebody's backyard, they likely are residing in a fire district. If you're talking about a fire in the woods like the Tillamook burn and it becomes a conflag, then that's going to be managed by the state fire marshal's office, and there will be resources coming from all.
But some of our firefighters might go and fight those fires too. Is that correct or not? Oh, and I'm frozen. I'm sorry.
Up in that area. She must be back. Then yes, we send vehicles up there. It's been very rare in my 14 years. We haven't gone up that far for any kind of wildland or forest fires, but we're seeing more and more issues with wildland fires and large forest fires going on. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. Way up Baker Creek or Willis, or up there, definitely something could start, excuse me. But those are all areas that that are our first response areas that we would definitely send to. And then if it got big, like what you'd see in Detroit or something, we would ask the state to come in. Our people would still be there, we would still be operating, but the state kind of takes over running the entire show and financially paying for that whole thing.
Great, that's what I thought. Thank you for that. I don't know if there are any more questions. I'm just going to check the chat. My apologies, I lost my my internet access. So it doesn't look like there are any questions here. I want to thank Councilor Garvin and Todd Godfrey. You guys are wonderful. Thank you for this presentation and for all of your support and all you do for our community. We can't do it without you. So thank you. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we will say goodbye. Have a wonderful day.